and what we really want to achieve is not 100% what we're going to achieve. I know, but we're going to have to reach a compromise. And I said, fine, you're the boss. Yeah, if that's what you think is necessary. And he said, you know why? We've got to get this settled. It can't go on. It's running out of control. It's all over the media, dominating the party conference, etc. Let us just get it settled.
Blair reluctantly agreed to curb the freedom from Treasury control that he had wanted for Foundation hospitals.
I tell you, within a matter of, I can't remember whether it was weeks or months, but I was having a conversation with him, and Tony said to me that he regretted the compromise.
Did you regret the compromise afterwards?
Any of these compromises I always prefer not to make, but on the other hand, the most important thing is to get the policy through. And in the end, actually, the compromise proved to be a lot more marginal than I originally anticipated.
Gordon Brown wanted Blair to announce that he would leave Number 10 at the end of his second term. Blair did consider saying he would go, but he decided that if he left, his mission to change public services would never be achieved.
The suggestion is that one of the reasons you decided to stay on, because you had to see those reforms through, was because you thought that Gordon Brown was not 100% committed to them.
It wasn't so much that I didn't think he was committed to them. It's that I felt real ownership of this. I could have decided to leave before the end of that term, but in the end I decided not to, because I wanted to see through the reform programme that we were doing, and I believe that that was the best thing for us, and also because we were right in the middle of, really tough things in Iraq and Afghanistan and so on, but primarily because there was a clear domestic reform programme that I'd really got, the reins between my hands at that point and wanted to see it through.
The question that begs is why you thought that no one else would?
I don't think it's so much that I don't think that anyone else would. It's that I'd been right in the middle of it. There were certain things that I wanted to get absolutely secure and bolted down before I left, which was, again, not something that I did because I thought no one else could do it. I mean, I wasn't sort of, stupidly arrogant enough to think that, but because I had begun it and was right in the middle of it and should complete it.
Some at Number 10 thought that since Blair was staying put, Brown had to go.
There were people at times who were saying to Tony, look, is it sensible to keep Gordon at the Treasury? Well, the answer to the question is, well, is it sensible to have him out of the Treasury? And I think his judgment was driven, in the end, by an understanding that Gordon had an ability that was greater than his colleagues. Now, that ability to run a department, to manage the economy in the way that he did, is the best harnessing of his talent. Imagine it on the outside. Not a very happy thought.
Blair was about to go into battle with rebel Labour MPs over his health and education reforms, and that would give Brown a new opportunity. From spring 2003, Blair faced a series of momentous showdowns in Parliament. The Conservatives saw a government at war with itself.
I can remember Blair attending a PLP, a Parliamentary Labour Party meeting, where there was huge rows going on inside the meeting. All of this stuff was really worrying the heart and soul of the Labour Party, because it looked like they were reneging, which they were, on their pledges. And so that was the bit that we could see was really festering away.
Friends of Gordon Brown think Blair reaped the consequences of a destructive approach to his own party.
With Tony, you'd have a combative parliamentary process with amendments and all the rest of it, half his party against him. Tony didn't mind if it involved confrontation. Gordon did mind. But if he thought there was a reasoned way of putting together some arguments that people would agree with, and the country more would agree with, he'd go that route. And I think that's the sensible way to go.
For Labour's chief whip, the conflict between Brown and Blair made Parliament harder to handle.
It did make it much more difficult when it was perceived that there wasn't absolute unity at the top of government. We've always known this in the Labour Party, And those years, those experiences reinforced that again and again to me.
Blair's plan to allow elite universities to charge students higher fees than other universities was another sore point with Labour MPs. Labour's 2001 election manifesto had pledged not to introduce top-up fees.
It was pretty much a balls up, to be honest. I mean, Labour committed not to have variable tuition fees in its 2001 manifesto, which was a blitheringly stupid thing to do. There's absolutely no need to do it.
But soon after the election in 2002, Tony Blair decided that he would consider introducing top-up fees after all.
You can get into a convoluted argument about what the manifesto means and what we were doing, whether it's consistent, inconsistent, and so on. But I mean, the fact of the matter is it was obviously a huge political problem. It's true that it's there in the manifesto. However, as I used to say to people, it is also true that the universities are saying we cannot wait 4 or 5 years for another election and then decide that we need change. So what do you do? And in the end, surely the most important thing is to put the country first.
Blair was vulnerable and needed Brown's support. But Brown favoured a different policy, a special tax for graduates, and wanted to delay any reform.
The Treasury's view was that this was not the right thing, that it would it could have damaging effects, and that it was politically extremely difficult to do.
The Chancellor in particular felt that we didn't need to be doing the reform at this particular stage, and we could have some kind of commission to look into it into the future and deal with it in a future Parliament, and he made that case. As we've had it told by people involved, it was nearly impossible to get the Treasury to engage with doing the work that was necessary in the early stages to get this off the ground. What was that about?
Well, part of the difficulty was, I think most people could accept that university finance had to be reformed. The question was what was the right way to do it, and some people wanted a pure graduate tax. Some people wanted the system that we were introducing. And you know, that took some time to resolve, and probably in retrospect we should have resolved it faster.
But again, going back to the difficulties of getting this thing done, this was described as interdepartmental guerrilla warfare. It's just to get the figures out upon which you could base the policy.
Well, it was difficult, let's say, but anyway, it was done in the end.
It was time for Parliament to show its claws. 2 backbench MPs emerged as key opponents of Blair's reforms, in both education and in health.
So you'd be setting up a 2 or 3 tier system where the rich able to get the money would go to the Class A universities, which charge 10, 20,000 a year, and then there would be the others where the poorer people went.
I'm proud that my party introduced the National Health Service. I'm proud that at the core of our thinking is the fundamental equity principle, and I worry that these proposals contained today will increase disparities between hospitals rather than reduce them.
Blair's battles over health and education were coming to a head at Labour's conference in Bournemouth in September 2003. The conference was waiting to see if the Chancellor would give strong backing to the embattled Prime Minister. Gordon Brown used his keynote speech to send out what many thought was a clear political signal. Just 1 year earlier, Tony Blair had confronted Labour conference with tough talk on the necessity for reform.
I believe that we are at our best when at our boldest. And so far, we've made a good start. But frankly, we've not been bold enough.
Now, Brown used a similar phrase with a striking difference.
This Labour Party, best when we're boldest, best when we're united, best when we are Labour.
Labour's rebels felt they didn't have to read between the lines. One says he met Brown's closest aide, Ed Balls, who in 2007 is a cabinet minister, on the seafront at Bournemouth.
I met Ed, and Ed said, gosh, you've been on the telly and the radio quite a bit recently on the issue. Keep going, that's good, excellent, you know, very good idea to keep fighting the cause. So it wasn't, the walking past looking elsewhere. It wasn't all over me or anything like that, but he was actually saying, good for you, keep going, it's very important, you know. It was certainly, you know, an encouragement, yeah, and that's how I took it.
Ed Balls says he can't recall this conversation and that he never encouraged any MP to vote against Tony Blair. The Labour MP who led the fight against Blair's health reforms also says he was encouraged by Brown's allies.
There was more than one ally of Gordon that I was in contact with, and the message was loud and clear that they fully understood where we were and good luck to us. And behind the scenes, we were being given a fair bit of help on some of the technical financial questions, because obviously health service finance is quite complex, and when you move into a new system and new structures, then we were raising questions about what the implications would be. And we were getting some pretty clear answers that all added up to a much stronger case from our point of view.
Blair's colleagues were convinced that Blair himself believed Labour's rebels were getting secret encouragement from Gordon Brown's team.
Tony certainly thought that there were people who were acting at Gordon's behest to try and make this opposition manifest. I was very doubtful about that.
Were you aware that allies of the Chancellor were agitating against the very reforms that you saw as an important part of your package?
Well, you know, people would say these things, but I have to say that every time I'd talk to Gordon, that he would make it clear he supported them. So, you know, in the end, that was good enough for me. In the end, we got them through. So, you know, look, one thing as well that I know how difficult it is. I mean, I've been talking about how difficult it is to do the job of Prime Minister. And I'm not going to, you know, there's just no point in me getting into going back over the past in a way that will just be used unhelpfully for him. But the fact is, it was a combination of a strong economy allowing the investment together with the reform that I think, you know, has produced great change in this country. So, you know, yeah, I'm not hiding the fact there were disagreements or tensions over various issues from time to time. Of course, that's what you'd expect. But at the same time, I believe we were infinitely stronger as a government because of his presence there and because of his achievements.
On top-up fees, the crunch came in January 2004 when the House of Commons voted. Labour rebels lined up with the Conservatives, and Blair faced a defeat which might force his resignation. If Blair had to go, Brown would be implicated and would suffer the fallout. At the last minute, the Chancellor pulled out the stops to avoid a government defeat.
They were quite good at covering it up. You know, Blair and Brown, for all their huge differences, could always put on the act in the end that they were together.
All sides knew the vote was on a knife edge.
One of the most significant implications of a defeat for this bill today would be that universities would be stripped of the resources they need to address the challenges of the future.
Do we increase that marketisation, market forces and so on, to a point that you start to lose the purpose of what education and higher education is all about?